Hello, welcome to class 13, which will be our last online class of the semester. And this week we're going to wrap up a couple of issues. We have spent a lot of time talking about how identifying ethical dilemmas. Probably the best example of that was in week 9 when you guys reviewed that YouTube video of that bad behavioral bear. And everybody was able to identify some of the obvious ethical violations that he engaged in, such as no assessment, using technical language, etc. I think what we all as behavior analysts struggle with even more than identifying when we do see ethical violations in other professionals, in parents, families, administrators, clients, it's harder to figure out how to explain that or communicate those ethical violations than it probably is to identify them. So that bear, for example, it was relatively easy to identify where the violations were. I would guess it would be more challenging to do something about that, which you need to do, which is approach him and how exactly you would do that to be most effective. Well, that is exactly the topic that Bailey and Birch address in chapter 17, and it involves the practical issues of how to deliver an ethics message effectively in a variety of situations to other BCBAs, to other professional clients, to parents, to families, to your supervisors, etc. And they do it in the way they do everything else in this book, in a very straightforward, kind of common sense kind of way that I think most of us appreciate. All right, chapter 18 talks about how we could avoid getting ourselves in situations where there are ethical dilemmas. Now, obviously, you can't avoid every ethical dilemma. If you do good work, if you're out there, you're going to get yourself in the middle of some ethical dilemmas, and then you just have to address them as we've talked about throughout the semester. But the point is, gosh, if we could avoid most ethical dilemmas, then that would be better. So chapter 18 focuses on how to avoid some of those ethical dilemmas. We've talked about some of that, like that risk-benefit analysis that we talked about earlier in the semester. I've been using that recently, and I've talked to several of you who have been using it. I think that's an effective way to avoid some ethical dilemmas, in the sense that we're formalizing exactly what we're going to do, not going to be able to do, what the risks of this are, how we're going to go about doing this. That's really what Bailey and Birch are talking about more in chapter 18. They talk about potentially a very formal process of trying to avoid ethical dilemmas, which is the Declaration of Professional Practices. I'd be interested to hear your impressions of that. And generally, that's what I'm going to ask you to do this week, is read those two chapters, 17 and 18 in Bailey and Birch, and tell me what your impressions were, what your take-home points were from those. Keep it pretty brief, 1 or 2 pages at the most, but just let me know what you've taken away from that, I'm particularly interested in what you think of the Declaration of Professional Practice. All right, and then as you know, the following week, which is going to be Monday, April 25th, will be our last class, and that will be a face-to-face class. Again, it will be in Dion 110 where we met last week and at 5:30. So I look forward to seeing you then. Don't forget to do this assignment, and if you have any questions, put them in the discussion board or email me. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday, April 25th at 5:30. Have a good week.